Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch Break Live with Tea Party Patriots Action. I'm Bill Pasco, Tea Party Patriots man in Washington, and I will be delivering the Washington Report and the call to action this week. Let's get right to it. The House and Senate will return Monday and stay in session through Thursday. Last week in the House was not in session. This week in the House will return Monday with the first vote set for 6:30 p.m. At that time, the House is scheduled to consider 18 bills under suspension of the rules. On Tuesday and for the balance of the week, the House will consider at least 4 bills pursuant to a rule. They are H.R. 4016, the Department of Defense Appropriations Act for 2026, H.R. 1919, the Anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act, H.R. 3633, the Digital Asset Market Clarity Act, and S. 1582, the Genius Act. I said at least there because there's a very high likelihood that the House is going to have to vote on something later in the week that's not on the schedule right now. The Senate amendments to H.R. 4, the Rescissions Act. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Last week in the Senate came back on Tuesday and voted to end debate on the nominations of Preston Griffith to serve as Undersecretary of Energy and Brian Bedford to serve as Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration. On Wednesday, the Senate voted to confirm both men to those positions. Then the Senate voted to end debate on the nominations of Scott Cooper to serve as Director of the Office of Personnel Management and William Briggs to serve as Deputy Administrator of the Small Business Administration. Then the Senate voted to confirm Scott Cooper to serve as the Director of the Office of Personnel Management. On Thursday, the Senate voted to end debate on the nomination of Jonathan Gould to serve as Controller of the Currency and Whitney D. Hermendorfer to serve as U.S. Circuit Judge for the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. Then the Senate voted to confirm Jonathan Gould to serve as Controller of the Currency, and then they were done. This week in the Senate will return Monday with the first vote set for 5:30 p.m. At that time, the Senate will proceed to a roll call vote on confirmation of the nomination of Whitney D. Hermendorfer to serve as U.S. Circuit Judge for the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. Then the Senate will vote on a motion to end debate on the nomination of Luke Pettit to serve as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. On Tuesday and Wednesday and maybe even Thursday, the Senate will be dealing with the rescissions package, about which we will speak more in a moment. After the Senate is done with the rescissions package, based on the Majority Leader's cloture filings, I anticipate we'll see votes on the nominations of Anthony Tate to serve as Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, and Joseph Edlow to serve as Director of the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services in the Department of Homeland Security. Reconciliation again. Senate Finance Chairman Mike Crapo, Republican of Idaho, just passed a massive tax bill. Most committee chairmen would celebrate such a victory and take some time off. Not Crapo. He's making plans for a second reconciliation bill to be considered later this year. Quote, "I've always been in favor of a 3-bill strategy, and there's a ton of things that we need to do," unquote, he told reporters Tuesday evening. Though he wouldn't go into detail about what he would want to see in a second reconciliation bill, he did note that there were several items that got left out of the final version of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act as a result of the Senate parliamentarian ruling them to be in violation of the Byrd Rule. House Budget Chairman Jody Arrington, Republican of Texas, speaking elsewhere to reporters on the same day, said almost exactly the same thing. And Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson, who wanted to cut still more money from the One Big Beautiful Bill, has also been talking up the idea of a second reconciliation bill in the fall. So has Speaker Mike Johnson in the House. So we'll keep an eye out for a reconciliation bill coming our way in the fall. Now let's talk about the rescissions package. On Tuesday, we'll see the Senate take action on a motion to discharge the rescissions package from the Appropriations Committee. Then there will be a vote on a motion to proceed to the package, which could occur Tuesday but might slip to Wednesday. The motion to proceed triggers 10 hours of debate, evenly divided. Then comes a vote-a-rama. Yes, we just had one a few weeks ago when the Senate considered the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. But that was a vote-a-rama on the reconciliation bill. And this is a vote-a-rama on a rescissions package. That will likely take up most of Wednesday and maybe even slip into Thursday. At the end of the vote-a-rama will come the vote on final passage. And remember, if the bill is amended at all, it has to go back to the House so the House and Senate can pass the same bill. And it all has to be sent to the President for his signature by midnight Friday night, or the whole thing falls apart and the President will have to spend all the money exactly as the Congress dictated originally. Now let's talk about 2026 appropriations, government funding. I'm going to make a prediction here, which I rarely do. We're going to see a government shutdown in early October. Here's why I think that. First, you cannot use the reconciliation process to fund the government. Appropriations bills move through the Senate only after at least 60 senators agree to let them move. And in the current environment, that means you need at least 7 Democrats to vote with the Republican majority. Democrats are in no mood to compromise with President Trump and their Republican counterparts. Trump just jammed a reconciliation bill down their throats without a single Democrat vote. Worse, Trump is jamming a rescissions bill down their throats this week. That's money that was appropriated by a previous Congress. He's telling the current Congress, I don't care what that previous Congress did. I want you to agree to cut money I don't want to spend now. If he's willing to do that now for spending that was previously approved, why wouldn't he do in the future do the same thing for spending that's being approved now? Democrats are aware of this and they're putting their Republican colleagues on notice. This week, pass the rescissions package and don't count on our votes for the 2026 appropriations bills. Second, at the end of August, that is, while Congress is out of session for the August recess, President Trump is going to announce much larger rescissions packages, except these rescissions packages are not going to require a positive vote from each house of the Congress. They're going to be pocket rescissions packages, in which the president simply declares his intent not to spend the money. If it happens within 45 days of the end of the fiscal year, the president doesn't need sign-off from the Congress. That's what the White House thinks anyway. In other words, right before the Congress comes back to deal with next year's government funding, President Trump is going to jam the Democrats again with a new rescissions package that he will argue does not even need congressional approval. That is not going to put the Democrats in a mood to compromise at all. Third, yeah, there's a third. There are only 22 legislative days left before the end of the 2025 fiscal year and the beginning of the 2026 fiscal year. That's 22 days to get 12 appropriations bills through the House and through the Senate and get them conferenced if there are any disagreements, which there will be, and then get them back to each house for a vote on the conference report on each one. There's not even enough time to do that, even if the bills have been written and approved by each of the appropriations committees, which they have not. Republicans are in charge of the White House, the House, and the Senate. The vast majority of Americans will hold Republicans and only Republicans responsible for a government shutdown if it happens, even if it's Democrats whose refusal to vote for a motion to proceed is the proximate cause of a shutdown. Stay tuned. Now let's talk about Russia and Ukraine. President Trump met at the White House this morning with Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. There, the president announced that the U.S. would be sending new weaponry to help Ukraine defend itself against Russian attacks, including Patriot anti-missile batteries, and that the weapons would actually be sent to European nations, which would purchase them from the United States and then donate them to Ukraine. So Ukraine gets the help it needs, and Europeans, who have been free-riding on the backs of American taxpayers for decades, will pay the bill. The idea came from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to President Trump when they met at the NATO summit several weeks ago. If earlier news reports are accurate, the weaponry will include not just offensive weapons like Patriots, but offensive weapons like long-range missiles, which would allow the Ukrainians to target Russian cities as far away as Moscow. President Trump also said he would be imposing secondary tariffs on Russia at a 100% level in 50 days. He didn't detail what Russia could do to avoid these secondary tariffs, but I think we've all got a pretty good idea. Now let's talk about the Epstein files fallout. At the start of the week last week, senior Trump administration officials announced that the Department of Justice and the FBI had concluded that they have no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex offender and financier, blackmailed powerful people, kept a so-called clients list, or was murdered. There was no client list, and he died by suicide in his detention cell. MAGA world was outraged. They had been promised more. Several months ago, at a White House meeting with MAGA world social media influencers, they had been handed briefing books that didn't have any new information in them, but had a page that said, Part 2, coming soon. They expected more, and they were looking for people to blame. In a Wednesday meeting at the White House, FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino and Attorney General Pam Bondi had an argument over the fallout. White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles was in the room to witness it. Bongino was said to be spitting mad, apparently at the thought that he had been hung out to dry, and was said to be considering resigning his position. He didn't go to work on Friday. Saturday evening, at Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA Summit in Tampa, Florida, Kirk asked the crowd of 7,000 attendees who they sided with, Bondi or Bongino. And he then announced the results as Bongino 7,000, Bondi 0. President Trump stepped in Saturday night, posting to his social media accounts a strong defense of Bondi and the job she's doing, and telling MAGA world to stop focusing on Epstein. Then, on Sunday, he told reporters he had spoken directly to Bongino, and Bongino was doing fine, and everybody was part of one big happy family. Stay tuned. Now to the Jenny Beth Show. Episode 129 of the Jenny Beth Show dropped last Wednesday, featuring Jenny Beth's conversation with Stephen Holbrook, Ph.D., and a leading Second Amendment scholar about the history, the legal battles, and some of the misconceptions surrounding America's most popular rifle, the AR-15. The two discuss why the AR-15 is protected under the Constitution, the Supreme Court cases shaping gun rights, and how modern gun control laws threaten individual liberty. As always, it's highly recommended. And that's our Washington report for this week. Now to the call to action. You know what I'm going to say. We're still doing multiple calls to action. There's still a lot going on in Congress now, and we still need your help on multiple fronts. You'll be able to find details on all this stuff on the front page of our website at teapartypatriots.org. That's teapartypatriots.org. There you'll find a slider that will take you to a page with all kinds of detail. But here's the general outline. We still need your help urging the Senate to move forward and move faster on confirming Trump nominees. But this week, we really want you to help us focus on one thing. Let's get the Senate to pass the rescissions package. Please call both your United States senators and urge them both to pass the rescissions package as early as possible. This is very important. This package is only $9 billion for a reason. It's a test case to see if both the House and the Senate are willing to pass a rescissions package at all. If they can't pass this, we won't get any more rescissions packages from the White House. But if we do pass it, we'll see more and bigger rescissions packages. Well, that's our broadcast for this week. Thanks for tuning in. Please take a moment to share this broadcast with your Facebook friends and post it to your other social media accounts. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Until then, be well and be active.